Hello, everyone. My name is Donji, and I am your host today. This is the Metabob Podcast. This is a podcast where we interview all the major thinkers and creators in the AI space. And today, I would love to welcome Tom Taulli. He is a Forbes blogger and startup advisor and an author of several books on AI and implementing AI, and also the robotic process automation. Uh, Thank you so much for being on our show.
Thank you very much for having me, and thanks for everyone for viewing as well.
Yeah, so I would just like to get so let's start off with your background. What is your
Mhm.
background?
Yeah, so it goes a long way. I've been around for a while. So my background is more technical. It,
Mhm.
it goes back to the early '80s when the PCs were just starting to come into the market, and I learned how to program. Start with BASIC, went to Pascal, C, played around a little bit with assembler, but that was a little tough for me to figure out. But yeah, I was just a kid, a lot of time on my hands, and I started coding my first programs for sale when I was in high school. And during those days, they had these computer magazines. Yeah, I mean they don't have magazines anymore, but they had these computer magazines, and the code listings were in the magazine itself. So I would write a program like a utility program. My code would be in there, and then I'd have a description of how the program would work. And some people would actually type those things in. They'd buy the magazine, type them in. So this is another era. Um, but so I fell in love with computers. Learned it just pretty much on my own in terms of programming. And then during the when I got into college, I started my first business. It was in e-learning. I was really no good at taking exams, so I
Mhm.
thought maybe I should create an e-learning exam. I almost did it for myself because I was so bad at taking exams, and it did really well. And then I started another company that was kind of like a Shopify back in the 97, 98, and we sold that company. And then during that time, I kept up my writing. So I started writing for Forbes.com. Uh, taught to like, I talked to even Sergey. I was one of the first persons to interview Sergey from Google.
Nice.
I got to talk to I talked to a lot of people. I just called him up and he answered the phone. I got to meet a lot of people, learn a lot of things, and then and then I started writing books. And then, as you mentioned, the latest books are, around AI. It's a passion of mine. When I got into my career, AI really wasn't a practical business.
Mhm.
You had to do different things to make money in those days. But to me, AI is more of a passion that I've always liked, but now it's more of a reality because we're seeing real life applications of it.
And you mentioned that you actually met Bill Gates when you were younger. So this
Yeah,
whole thing about meeting these celebrity tech stars started at a young age.
yeah. So my dad took me to this computer club in Pasadena at Caltech, and we were the biggest computer club in California, if not the United States. And this was during the early '80s. And so this was a common way these computer companies would sell software. They would go to a lot of them were CPAs and wanted to buy the next spreadsheet or things like that, or what's DOS 5.0 going to do for me for my business and things. Those were the topics back then. And because we were an influential group, we got all the top computer pioneers. So I got to meet Bill Gates and talk to Bill Gates and ask him all kinds of questions. And then Philippe Kahn from Borland, Peter Norton from Norton Utilities would stop on by, and it was a lot of fun. So for a kid, just learning about computers, and this was a time before, no one really knew who Bill Gates was at that time. They may have known who Steve Jobs was, but they
Mhm.
didn't know who Bill Gates was. But I got to meet him really early before, it became such a global business. And that was an inspiration to me to get into the computer business.
Yeah, so you got to see this person and you kind of like saw like, oh, this Bill Gates guy, he seems like an important dude before other people kind of realized that.
Yeah, yeah. And I just love the process of demoing software.
Uh-huh.
Like that, like they would I remember when they demoed Excel for the first time, and people were just going, ooh, ah, like it was like the best thing they've ever seen. So, what I noticed with these pioneers in computers is that they were just really good at putting on a show, and getting people excited to then buy software. So it was very much an interactive, live environment in those days to get people to adopt software.
Is it something that we're kind of missing now?
You know what? I got to, speaking of influencers, I got to know Mark Benioff really early in the days of Salesforce.
Mm-hmm.
And if you read his book, his earlier book about the cloud, he has a whole chapter on there about events. And
Mm-hmm.
not just, and he has the Dreamforce, which is the mega event of all mega events. But he would put on these small events, almost like these little user groups himself and I thought that was just an amazing way for him to spread the word.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of that is missing. I think going back to some a little of the old school ways of getting with your customers, going from, like a roadshow from town to town and showing your software, it is a really effective approach. Doing it completely online, I mean, companies have done very well with that, but I do think I think some companies are missing out on that.
Mm-hmm. And so you took this passion of, and maybe this skill you could say, of knowing about tech or knowing who's going to be influential ahead of time, and you transitioned this into finding out information and then publishing it. So so that was like a major turning point of your career when you actually started doing that professionally. And when did you start doing that?
So I was 14 years old, 13, 14 when I think I published my first program in a magazine. So yeah, it's funny because I would be in English class, and I was thinking, my English teacher is grading me on my paper, and I'm thinking I'm actually selling my writing, and she has no clue that I'm doing that right now, but I might be. She probably hasn't sold. There's an old joke by Stephen King. He said that you're a writer if you submit something, the publisher accepts it, they pay you at least $50, and the check doesn't bounce. In that case, you're probably a real writer at that point. So I was kind of in that. I got a check, it didn't bounce. I was in high school, and this little spending money, but no one knew that what I was doing. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then so what happened first? Starting to write about AI or writing for Forbes?
Oh, so Forbes came in the mid '90s. So really, when it started, Forbes, and the way that came about was I started another company for IPOs. It was called Direct IPO.
Oh, let's start with that. Yeah.
Yeah. So at that time, the internet was really starting to emerge, and this company called Wit Beer did an IPO. People thought you had to be drunk to buy the stock over the internet. This IPO.
Was it like
to buy this
ICOs
deal.
today?
No, it was a traditional IPO, but
No, but
the company,
was like the feeling towards it kind of like ICOs today?
Oh yeah, definitely. The SEC came in and tried to shut it down, and because the company was selling the IPOs through the internet, and and people were freaking out, like, this is the end of the world. Aren't you supposed to have a piece of paper, like a prospectus, and then the SEC looked at it and they realized, what, actually, there's nothing wrong with this. We really can't make a case why this is wrong. So now they had to make some adjustments and things like that. But so I thought, let's create a company around that to help companies raise money through the internet. And so we sold that company early on, but I was writing some reports on IPOs, like a Netscape IPO or Yahoo or whatever, Excite or CMGI. And then, so I would post those on our website. It wasn't even called a blog, but I think it was probably a blog. And so when we sold the company, I left and I stopped doing that. And then Forbes came to me and said, what happened to your articles? And I told them what happened. They go, well, do you want to write for us? And that's how it started. So,
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
So then what did that look like writing for Forbes? Like what is it?
Forbes is, well, there's a good story behind that.
Mhm.
So Forbes, even to today, Forbes has a great name. So I can usually interview some really interesting people.
Mhm.
But back then there was a difference. And I wrote for the website. So back then, if you wrote for the website, you're kind of like third class.
Mm.
No one really wanted to talk to me because I wrote for the website.
Mhm.
They'd actually ask me that. They go, "Oh, you're from Forbes, but are you from the magazine or the website?" When I told them I was with the website, they're like, "Maybe I don't want to talk to you." So, yeah.
Not the way it is
But then,
today.
not the way it is today. I don't even know if there is a magazine, but I think there is. But I don't get that question anymore. So I haven't got that question in a long time. But in the early days, I got that question a lot.
Mhm.
But it was great because it was a great venue. Got to learn about the online world and media and publishing on the online world pretty early. And but yeah, it was a different time, definitely
Mhm.
different
And
attitudes.
then what were some of like your favorite articles that you wrote for Forbes?
Wow. I've written a lot. What were the favorite? I think the favorite ones are just, like something like with Mark Benioff, you know,
Mhm.
maybe a little early in the history, or like the one I wrote about Sergey. Um, um, I don't even know where they're at, if they're even still around, those articles,
Could
but
you tell me what it
uh,
was like to interview Sergey?
uh, uh, literally, I got the phone number and I
Mhm.
called him and he answered it, and we talked for 45 minutes, and we talked about everything. So and the reason I called is I was using Google myself for my own writing.
Mhm.
I thought it was a really effective way to do research for my writing. But I asked them, I go, "There's no ads on your website."
Mhm.
And at that time, search was considered third class. You had to be a portal, and you had to have ads all over your site. There was, Google was just a box with
Yeah.
Google on top, and you just you just put information. I don't see any ads here, and I said, are you going to make money? And he goes, "Oh yeah, we're going to make money." And I said, "Well, how?" And he says, "I'm not going to tell you." So yeah,
You
we had a
probably
good
got a lot of that
conversation.
response as a reporter. We're not going to
Yeah,
tell you our
yeah.
secret sauce.
Well, that's the funny thing is, a lot of entrepreneurs, they'll talk to a partner and they
Mhm.
want to do these non-disclosure agreements and confidentiality, and they don't want to give out their secrets. And then when they talk to the media, they just start talking about everything. It just starts coming out. So, but he was pretty guarded on, the monetization strategy
Mm.
at that Google. Obviously it was probably going to be some advertising, but I don't even think at that time when I talked to them, I don't think they had a clear cut idea about the AdWords.
Mhm.
I think that came later, and that wasn't even really their idea. That was from another company
Mhm.
that figured that out. So, yeah, entrepreneurs are, yeah, it's always fun talking to entrepreneurs
Mhm.
and get their story and how they came up with the ideas. And so I've talked to quite a few of them over the years.
And what about Mark Benioff? What stood out about that interview?
Okay, so Mark, I got to meet in person quite a bit
Mhm.
in San Francisco, or when he was down here where I'm at in LA, we would meet up. So I mean, and it'd be things like we would just kind of, I'd be walking in San Francisco and we just bump into each other, stuff like that. But it was early days. Not a lot of people knew who Mark was. So I got a lot of time to spend with Mark early on, and he's a big guy. He's tall.
Mhm.
Uh, and the other thing too, in these events he has, uh, he has like a 360-degree vision capability. He can like see the whole room. I don't know how he does it. Yeah. And he can tell if someone like at Salesforce is, like not really doing their job, and like, messing around and not helping a customer or not trying to get a customer. He just has a sense of how to work a room and how to manage a room. Uh, and I have to say, he's just an amazing marketer.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, and I think he dealt really great with press and media and was always responsive, um, to whatever they wanted, you know. And he always had a good quote, and he had a great story. He had a great story. Um,
Mhm.
it made a lot of sense to me. I mean, I was someone who built software, and I thought, why do you have to get a CD and put it in your computer and install a program and I'll do all these steps to get to where you want to get? Why can't I just go to the internet and it's just there?
Mhm.
To me, it's a really simple idea, but for enterprise software, that was a radical idea. Um, but he made it happen.
Mhm.
So yeah, he's a force of nature, definitely. Great vision. Uh, you know, very interesting to talk to. Always had something interesting to say.
That's interesting. So, how did you start transitioning into the AI space?
So AI, like I mentioned, AI it's something I've always been interested in, but more from a science fiction standpoint or
Mhm.
movies or it's always cool.
Well,
Robots taking over the
what
world.
what movies, by the way?
Oh, I mean, you got the Terminator and you know 2001: Space Odyssey. So you got the kind of the classic
Mhm.
AI movies. So I was really into those. Even Star Wars. I mean, there's
And books?
you know, yeah. Books. What would be the books? Well, I mean, Arthur Clarke for 2001. I used to read like Isaac Asimov, Heinlein, traditional science fiction writers. Uh,
Mhm.
Now the word AI was coined in the mid 1950s, but even in science fiction, you really wouldn't see that word used.
Mhm.
But you would see androids or robots, that acted like people, and things like that. But yeah, so you know, I've always had an interest in this, but for me, I couldn't figure out how to make money, and I had to make money. I had to pay bills and things like got to eat and pay bills. So that wasn't really an option to do AI during the 80s or the 90s. So the way, but I with Forbes and all these other things, I see what's happening out there. And during the last 10 years, I saw that there's some great innovation in the AI category, some real innovation. Big companies, the hyperscalers like Google, moving into it,
Mhm.
and thought that so I started writing about it for Forbes and talking to a lot of people in the industry. So it's just kind of learning by osmosis, just kind of like I did with my web IPO company, and when I got into computers when I was in high school, it's just by
Mhm.
osmosis and just kind of learn as you go along. And nowadays it's great because you got the internet and YouTube, and you know, it's like Bayes' theorem. Like I haven't seen that since I was in high school, and I completely forgot what that Bayes theorem is all about. I just go on YouTube and they have this great presentation about what Bayes' theorem is all about. So you can learn a lot just by osmosis.
Mhm.
And so over time, and then talking to really smart people, and that's kind of just how it happened. And then in terms of the AI, the first book on AI is called AI Basics, and I thought, what I saw was that there's two categories, buckets of books. There's the technical books, how to learn Python or Spark, whatever it is, technical stuff. And then there's the take over the world societal books. You know,
Mhm.
you know, AI is good, AI is bad, but it's more philosophical. But then there's the middle part of like, I just want to know what AI is. What's the difference between deep learning and machine learning, and how can I use it, or do I need to use it in my business? So that was the book I wanted to write, and that's what I put together.
You wanted the AI for like the everyday businessman who just wanted to start knowing if they should get into the space or not.
Exactly. And sometimes they may have no choice.
Hmm.
The CEO reads something in Forbes and they go, "What's this AI thing? And we need to do it in our company." And they then talk to this manager over here, and all of a sudden, one day you're in charge of the AI project, and you don't even know
And
what
they don't
AI
know all the
is or where to
lingo.
start.
Yeah,
Exactly.
they don't know like
Yeah.
which concepts are, oh, I should watch out for that, or I don't need to worry about
Yeah.
that.
We're just evaluating software.
Yeah.
What do I buy? Who do I hire? Data. What data? Where do I get the data from? I mean, there's so many
Labeling.
questions. Labeling. Yeah, and these are things they don't even think. Those are the things that people don't think about until it's
Yeah.
too late. So that's the other
You
thing
don't want
about
to
the
set a
book.
budget. Like you don't want to set a budget as a
Yeah.
company and then realize like, oh my God, I didn't realize that labeling was so incredibly important.
That's right, exactly. Well, yeah, and it's like these mundane process. We all, in the media, they talk so much about the algorithms, the cool algorithms. Well, I mean, these algorithms are mostly off the shelf, open source, free.
Hmm.
You kind of just plug and play them. It's the data. I mean, and it's stupid stuff about data. It's like, wrangling the data, finding the gaps in the data, you know, inconsistencies, like you said, just labeling it so you can test the model.
Hmm.
Um, so a lot of those things people don't even know about until it's too late, and they've already sunk a lot of money into something, and they have to redo things at the end.
So yeah, a lot of businesses, they'll be forced into a position where they need to start picking up AI. You have this book for them.
Hmm.
They can just
Yeah,
read it, start getting off the ground, knowing what they're doing. And I- it's kind of like raising a kid, right? I mean, like, this is not like traditional software. You actually have to
yeah,
train it.
right. It's different. There's many differences. Yeah, even traditional. I mean, installing a CRM is not easy. You know,
Hmm.
uh, but at least you know that if you put some contacts in a CRM, they're going to be there. Whether people actually use a CRM is another question. But but there's a lot of examples of just traditional software being difficult to implement and, most importantly, get adopted. That's the
Hmm.
same with AI. But AI has even more problems, because AI is not perfect. It's based on probabilities, and that
Hmm.
is insights and probabilities. It's not always going to be right, and so that's a bit of a change in the mindset. Companies need to think about before making this transition into AI. Data is obviously something we've been talking about. It's incredibly important and tough to figure out. Um, and usually you're spending much more time on the data than you'd realize.
Hmm.
Um, and you know uh, monitoring. So there's drift. So you know the classic example now is COVID-19. Um, companies' models suddenly went haywire within a week or two because people weren't on freeways anymore or going to
Hmm.
restaurants, and all the models just blew up. Now that's an extreme example, but usually models, change over time. So you need to make sure those models you track them, they're updated, and like you said, you get the benefit of the learning. You just can't just press a button and it just figures it out on its own and you'll be fine. You don't have to worry. You still have to So you might have what in RPA, yeah, these centers of excellence, or a committee or someone, a group of people that keeps an eye on it. So and I think it's the other thing, part of AI, the human in the loop. Humans are uh, we can't get rid of humans yet. So and that'll be a disaster if you think you're gonna if you think you're gonna have this self-driving organization or self-driving business. Good luck with that. It's gonna be a disaster.
Hmm.
You got to have the humans in the loop. I think the funny thing about that is Elon Musk a few years ago almost imploded Tesla because he went overboard on the automation in the factories
Hmm.
and almost killed the company. And then he sent out a tweet saying, humans are underrated, and he realized that we need to have humans in the loop here. We
Hmm.
just can't have it completely automated. That's not going to work. Now, at some point down the road, it will happen, but we're not there. We're not anywhere close to that yet. which is great opportunities for entrepreneurs, by the way.
Yeah. So speaking of pitfalls of business and AI and stuff like that, what are some other pitfalls that you see in AI?
Mhm. I think the one is to start to do your own AI project. So let's say I'm an organization, and
Hmm.
I'm probably a non-tech organization, and I haven't really done anything in AI. So if you're going to start with a custom AI project, that's like the worst thing you can do. Um, they're expensive, they're difficult. Even the best organizations can have problems with a
Hmm.
custom project. You know, I would say, and that doesn't also mean you go and buy a program for AI or off the shelf program for AI either. I would say that look at what you already have. Chances are you have software that includes AI in it. And maybe you're not using those features.
Hmm.
So start there. You know, it's already integrated into your company. Your employees are already using the system. So if you have a CRM or ERP that has some type of AI in there, start with that. You start
Hmm.
learning about it. Start understanding about it. Then the next step is, maybe let's get that chat bot for our website, and don't build your chatbot. That's
Hmm.
probably a lot of work, and it takes a lot of data scientists. You need to probably get some data scientists for that. So there's a lot of off the shelf chatbots. Try one out, see how it works, learn about it, and maybe over time you can start customizing the chatbot.
Hmm.
And then as you start building these AI muscles, if there's something that's really core to your business, maybe think about that AI project or that custom project for AI. But that's how I would step into it, the different steps for
Hmm.
going down the journey of AI. I think what happens is, they want to the CEO wants to boil the ocean, cure cancer and do all these great things. And it just winds up being expensive and going absolutely nowhere. I mean, I think IBM is actually an example of this, and literally they tried to cure cancer without Watson. Didn't happen.
Hmm.
And now they looks like they want to sell the health business for Watson after they poured billions of dollars into it.
Hmm.
Um, so it's been considered a bit of a failure, and a lot of lawsuits too. Customers that
Hmm.
were unhappy because the results did not come to fruition.
Hmm.
So, you know, and then also be very, very clear and measurable about what you want to achieve. Uh, and it's better if there's a yes or no answer. Um, you know there are other types of, as you get better at AI, maybe there's little fuzzier metrics you can work with, but um, um, one area is like a password for a chatbot, like a password reset system. Either the password worked or either it worked or it didn't. Either the person got in or the person didn't. That's a really good place to start for something like using some analytics, some data, you
Hmm.
know, some automation, because you have a yes or no answer with that.
Would you say that it's important to be an expert at basic data analytics before you jump into AI? Or can you
If
jump
you're
it?
using software that is um, from a company, like if you're using Salesforce Einstein, I don't think you really have to. So if I think if you're using off the shelf product that's like a chatbot, maybe, yeah, it's good to have maybe some background, but I don't think a lot. Definitely, if you're going to do an AI project, you're going to have to probably get a data scientist or something like that.
Hmm.
Now, there's this whole thing about auto ML and the citizen developer, or no code and low code. Um, and to me, those may not be really deep or sophisticated AI. So the more sophisticated AI you want to do, yeah, the more expertise you're going to have.
Hmm.
And some of this you may not necessarily have to be a data scientist, but maybe reskill your employees to learn about some of these data concepts. And then there's
Hmm.
always someone in the organization that's a guru at Excel or good with numbers. That's where you can start, and then you can then go from there.
So
Yeah.
what about um, deep tech? So we've covered like,
Mhm.
pitfalls of, you know, uh, smaller AI projects, but what about the tech projects, the bigger ones?
Mhm. Well, yeah. I mean, it's usually larger organizations that can pull that off, or it's tech companies that have the tech skills to pull it off. And for mid-sized companies, it's probably, or small companies, it's probably almost impossible unless you're a tech company. And it's probably really difficult if you're a mid-sized company right now, given, there's been a lot of advancements with the tools, but you still really need to know what you're doing. This low code, no code, yes, for Forbes, I get pitched all the time. So I get pitched by like a no code, low code company every day. I can't believe how many low code, no code companies there are out there. But my hunch is they're not solving a lot of these problems. I don't think you could just go and buy a low code system and then you're, a real deep AI company without really, having people on your staff that really know what they're doing. I don't think we're there yet.
Oh, so they're proliferous. Yeah. What about, so there's different types of conversations about AI. You focus mainly on the business type, but you also mentioned that there was the apocalypse people, and then there's also the high tech, coding people. So what do you think, just for fun and kicks, what do you think about the future? Are we doomed from robots?
So I think it depends. In one sense, they should make our lives easier and better, and maybe we have more free time to devote to things that are fun or more interesting than doing the drudgery of certain type of work. I personally believe that I think that the biggest change, well, there's probably two major issues that I see. There's the whole ethics part of AI, about the use of your data, privacy. We're in the middle of that, and it's still early stages and still being worked out. So that's going to be a big point of contention and issues going forward. The other is automation of work, and again, humans are very good at certain things that machines are not good at. They could take a look at an invoice and probably figure out, that's a scam or there's something wrong with it. They may not even know why, but they can usually just look at something and say, let's put this over here. Let's not pay it right now. Let's review this one. So that accountant goes through the stuff, and they could, we just have amazing pattern recognition and insight and intelligence that computers are not there yet, but they're going to get there. They're going to get there. And so, so look at the warehouses, for example. That's a big business. It's a growing business. It's a source of employment for a lot of people right now. But probably 10 years from now, they probably will be automated completely by robots. And that could be millions of jobs gone, right? Trucking. A lot of trucking is long drives, not a lot going on. And, seems like that can be pretty much automated away. Those are millions of jobs right there. So I think there's like these swaths of job areas that could, in the next, I'm not saying it's going to go away next year, but I could see in the next 10 years, some of these areas. And then it becomes a question of, as these machines start to really understand what's happening, that they can take a look at an invoice and figure out there's something wrong with it and really be pretty accurate about it. Then it comes to the white collar jobs. How many of those are going to be automated? I talked to someone about, automation in the medical industry, and he brought up the question. He said, what would be automated first, a doctor or a nurse? And his conclusion was a doctor, because a lot of doctors, it's all about diagnosing someone
based on stats
and then writing a prescription.
Yeah.
And that's about it, right? Surgery and all that's a whole nother question. But a typical general practitioner doctor, it's like, oh, your wrist, do an X-ray, it's broken, we'll put something on it, and whatever. Like, there's a lot of things that are standard, but a nurse is not about that. A nurse is providing care, providing comfort. Um, you know, there's something more that'd be hard, actually, probably harder for a computer to figure out.
Hmm.
Whereas, actually, a lot of things that doctors do could probably be figured out with a computer.
Hmm.
Not
There's the
today,
emotional
but
aspect.
over time. Exactly. So the emotional parts of it, I know that there's some people working on that. It's really early stages with robots and emotions and things like that. Um, so yeah, I think that now I talk to a lot of companies who will say, "Oh no, jobs, they're going to be there's going to be tons of jobs and it's going to be fine." But I don't know if I buy that argument.
Hmm.
Um,
So in
Long term, I don't buy that argument.
so what's it called? So back in the day, in the 1800s, I think, there was a
Mhm.
group of English workers who destroyed
Oh yeah,
machinery known as like the Luddites.
right.
They especially loved to destroy the cotton mills and wooden mills
Yeah,
because they believed it would threaten their jobs.
that's right.
Do you think it's a different? Do you think it's a different paranoia than then, or do you think it's a something that's more, or do you think it's that it's different from them, where maybe they were just overlooking the fact that it would make people's lives easier so they could focus on other
Hmm.
stuff? Or do you think that there's not enough other stuff that we could focus on to give people work?
Yeah, yeah. Um, I think it's going forward. It's probably going to be tough to figure out what people are going to do for work.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, there'll be some people that are just natural at things. People will be actors. Replicating an actor and actress would probably be really difficult.
And
Although with all
comedy.
this deep fake, yeah, yeah, exactly. Creating a clone of Robin Williams is probably a
I
tough
mean,
one.
humans can't, we can't do it,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. There's there are people with unique skill sets that
Hmm.
command millions of dollars a year in compensation. Baseball players, football players, actors, these celebrities. That will always be there. The thing is, there's only so many of those types of people. Most people don't have a lot of skills. A lot of people are not that interested in accumulating new skills. They don't necessarily like going to school or um, and so I do think that whether that I don't know about the Luddites or revolution, but I could see there being a lot of discontent.
Hmm.
And if I'm not getting where I want to go, a lot of people will just blame others for their or computers or whatever, politics or whatever it is. Now, there was an interesting example a few years ago in Arizona when with Waymo, these
Hmm.
self-driving cars that, and they were being pelted by rocks and shot at uh, because they felt like so the community would felt like they were being used as a guinea pig, and maybe they would take over their jobs or stuff like that.
Hmm.
So yeah, yeah. So I would not be surprised if we all of a sudden saw these self-driving big
Hmm.
rigs and people losing their jobs. I think there'd be some people that'd be angry about that.
Yeah. The way I kind of would like to see the future unfold, and this is just what I would like, but is to see that there's companies like Phantom AI who do,
Mhm.
they do the remote takeover for self-driving cars that,
Right.
uh, are not able to, so the ideally, like there's a certain
Right.
number of truck drivers that could be on the road, right? But then with
Right.
self-driving cars, they do the fleets where they follow one driver, etc. So you could put more cars on the road that are automated, and then you could use those
Exactly.
truck drivers to then take over remotely in situations where they might need to. So I'd hope that there would be a transition to letting people, you know facilitate these AIs as kind
Hmm.
of like, so you're not taking away their jobs, you're just transitioning their jobs. And then
Yeah.
for the people who get displaced, I would hope that, like, if we look 100 years ago, modern day people live better than the kings of 100 years ago.
Sure. Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
better access to water, better access to medicine. So I'm just
Yeah.
imagining 100 years from now, like, you know, I would just be able to hopefully focus on painting all day. I could
Yeah.
focus on music, and then like I'd be living better than Jeff Bezos today. I mean,
That's
that
true.
would be
Yeah.
that's kind of where I'd hope we'd go.
Yeah. No, that could be the reality. I mean, it could be that productivity will increase significantly, and you know, now then it's a political question as
Hmm.
how you divide the pie.
Hmm.
Um, so there are those that will, have go into this with a bigger piece of the pie, and they may not be as willing to, you know, spread the wealth.
Hmm.
Um,
It might
so
take longer
you
to
know,
get to the Jeff Bezos quality of life for the average person.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But if there's a lot of people that go and vote and
Hmm.
express their wishes, but it could have a major impact on what we view as capitalism versus socialism versus communism, and um, you know something I don't think Marx or Lenin really thought about. Um, but yeah, it could be something in our lifetime that we'll
Hmm.
have to contend with. We're not there yet, but it could be accelerated. There are a lot of employers desperately looking for employees, and they can't find them
Hmm.
right now. And what it places, employers get put in the position where they're just going to have to try to find ways to automate. If they can't
Hmm.
find employees, they're going to look for automation. And so, and then businesses are going to try to come up with solutions to solve those problems. So, COVID in a way could have accelerated this move to automation of the workforce. We'll
Hmm.
see. But it probably pushed it forward a little bit.
And so we talked about generally I mean the middle route of AI that you've covered for just
Yeah.
business people looking at it. We've covered the other part of what do we think of this in the future, and then there's the third part, and I do want to touch back on the middle one, the one we started out
Mhm.
with again. But what do you feel like is what is going on in the AI space that you like as far as the future thinking people? Not future thinking as in like where's it going to be in 100 years, but like
Mhm.
the cutting edge. What do you feel about the cutting edge AI space?
Um, Open mind is probably a good example of kind of cutting edge. Um, uh, was it Deep Mind? Is the other one from Google?
Hmm.
Uh, so it's mostly the hyperscalers. They have the resources and the talent to do
Hmm.
this, and they can wait a while to see this through. Even Microsoft, I know they've worked a lot of time, a lot of years on AI, and they're doing a lot better at it now. So I think the good news here is these companies are pushing the envelope. The bigger companies are definitely pushing the envelope in innovation. They can do that. They also have access to the data sets too that can make that a reality. So yeah, I think and we're going to see. And the nice thing about that, we're going to benefit from that because it's going to be on our smartphones. It's going to be in our websites, and we're going to benefit. Probably be free.
Hmm.
Um, so, uh, but the kind of the real cutting edge part of AI is that because there's some will divide AI into two parts. You got the strong AI and you got the weak AI. We're in the world of weak AI. It's specific to a certain use case.
Hmm.
Chatbot, whatever it is, whatever. Strong AI is the science fiction part of AI where these the Turing test has been broken. You can have free form conversations with the AI. You talk to the AI and you don't even realize that you're talking to a machine. So companies like Google and the bigger companies are definitely working on that. And then the other things that I think get overlooked in terms of innovation are, what do you do about hardware and energy?
Hmm.
Um, we're kind of reaching the limits here on Moore's law,
Hmm.
on chip, power and capacity. and running all this stuff takes a lot of energy. uh, you know, our brain uses, I don't know, like 40 watts. I forget what it is. It uses not a lot of energy to do this amazing thing, right?
Hmm.
To replicate, our brain using our traditional energy sources and our traditional computer systems, it just probably take this like a huge nuclear power plant to power that.
Hmm.
It's just the energy part of it. So, these advances in quantum computing, more efficient chips or different types of chips, you know, we're seeing more innovation there. And I think that's going to be a limiting factor,
Hmm.
is the whole chip hardware part of it. And there's NVIDIA, and there's these companies, or even Google's building their own chips and Amazon building their own chips. So I think there's a lot of innovation there, but a lot more it needs to be done to advance, to
Do you,
really push this envelope.
do you think that that is gonna be the decision maker whether or not we get to the strong AI versus the weak AI?
I think so. I think we're going to have some new type of chip technology
Hmm.
and better, more efficient energy systems.
Hmm.
Right now we're building data centers around huge rivers, or places that are cool,
Hmm.
so it doesn't overheat because of all the energy this stuff is producing. Um, doesn't seem like that's a viable long-term solution.
Hmm.
Um,
Especially if you want to scale up, you can't have like
exactly,
the Nile
exactly,
River just like peppered with.
exactly. There's only so many places you can put these data centers, and they're kind of running out of places there to put them, and they're not cheap. Um, so it's the elephant in the room,
Uh-huh.
you know, I would say right now. But
And
there's innovation going on, like,
in
for that
general,
to try
what
to
are you
break
excited for? What are you excited for just in general?
on the technology front. Um, I would really like to see like quantum computing take
Mhm.
off. Uh, Now there's a lot of promise there. It's still kind of theoretical, but it seems like that holds a lot of promise, and I think that would open up a lot of opportunity, you know, for strong AI, better, more, faster computers, smaller computers, So I think quantum is an interesting topic.
Mhm.
Uh, I've been paying attention to.
You gonna be coming out
Definitely
with a
really
book about
exciting. Yeah.
that?
I don't know about that, but yeah, I think it's a little early,
Mm-mm.
for that. But maybe in a couple years to see what comes out of it. And there are companies working on it that you wouldn't even think would be involved. I had a webinar with an executive at United Technologies, and they've been investing a huge amount of money in quantum computers. So never would have thought that.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's one area I'm keeping an eye on.
And what is that company known for doing?
They're conglomerate, industrial conglomerate.
Mhm.
So they do, like high end machines, helicopters, defense. They do a lot of defense work,
Mhm.
um, but they do some chip technology. They have a history of doing some chip technology, and I think they made an acquisition around this area. That's how they got into this quantum computing
Oh, wow.
area. Yeah.
Um, and what other tips do you have for people looking to either start an AI company or for businesses
Mhm.
looking to integrate AI?
Well, for starting an AI company, I would think, always start with the problem.
Uh-huh.
Uh, I never thought about this in a structured way when I started my businesses, but in a way, I kind of did the same thing. So, I wasn't good at exams. So I created a company to solve my problem.
Mhm.
I was assuming other people had that problem. I was right. Uh, the Shopify example is like back in 97, 98. It was really difficult to create your own website. Very difficult and expensive.
Mhm.
So I knew that firsthand. I knew that was a problem a lot of people had, but they wanted to have their own website. So why don't I create something that makes it easier for people to do that.
Hmm.
So that was it. I mean, it's just simple, really simple. Um, so so like with any company, whether I don't care if it's AI or a lemonade stand or whatever it is you want to make as a company, start with the problem. And then can AI solve that problem? And usually it has to do with data. So, you know, do you have data or can you get access to data? If not, it's probably a tough proposition to make an
Hmm.
AI company. Um, and then, unless it's more like a consulting type company or your tools company, you may not necessarily have to have that. But if you're creating a chatbot company, you probably need access to, definitely need access to data sets and things like that. But there's a great blog post from a couple of the partners at Andreessen Horowitz. This came out about a couple of years ago, but it's still valid today. And they went through all their AI companies and came up with different conclusions about them. And one thing is, they tend to be more customized solutions, um, and do not scale as well, and the margins aren't as great as people would think. So, and the conclusion of the article is that said that these probably issues will probably get better and be worked on, but they're not enough to not invest in AI.
Hmm.
But you need to recognize that this is not like creating a SaaS company. Um, if I create a CRM or ERP or whatever, that scales pretty well. AI, because you're dealing with usually different verticals, different data sets, um, it's different. It's just like we talked about earlier uh, about implementing AI. And then, like I think about using AI, I just said, like I said, I think kind of going back to what I said before, don't boil the ocean, but start now. Start
Hmm.
now, because other your competitors are some of them, at least they're tough ones, are starting now anyway, or maybe they're ahead of you. So get started.
Hmm.
That'd be my number one recommendation. Is just don't think about it. Do something about it.
Hmm.
And you probably already have access. Some of your tools probably already have the ability built in anyway. So take advantage of that.
Nice. And what projects are
Yeah.
you working on now? What things are you looking forward to publishing, or
Oh.
companies you're waiting to start, or what's next for you?
In terms of it looks like I'm a project I'll be starting on soon is a course on AI,
Hmm.
and that'll probably take a lot of time. um, and then, I also help different companies out, different startups. Actually, uh, one is it hasn't, it's kind of in the stealth mode, but it's in England. So I'll probably be working on that as well. In terms of starting my own business, probably more of a young person's game. And I'm not, unless I come up, something, Apple hits me on the head and I come up with an idea and a problem to solve, like you said.
Hmm.
May go down that path, but I have you know nothing on the horizon as of yet of doing my own business
Hmm.
again.
And then, what is like the how do you interact with your community? I noticed you have like a pretty good Twitter following. What's the best
Mhm.
way for people to interact with you?
I do have a website. You just type in my name, Tom Taulli, TAULLI.com. And on there, I have a contact form where you can contact me, or you can reach me there. My LinkedIn is there, Facebook, Twitter.
Hmm.
I do follow all of them. So, however, you know, whatever medium works for you, feel free. I'm old school, so usually, email is probably the easiest
And who
to
do you
reach me
want
at.
to reach out to you? I know you don't want every other no code start project to reach out to
Yeah,
you and DM you on Twitter.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, uh, definitely. Yeah, so for like Forbes, uh, don't. it probably is not going to help to say, I represent, XYZ companies, do you want to talk to them? Or like, it's like, I don't have time in the day to talk to all these
Hmm.
companies. So if you pitch me for a story, the better success you'll have is if you just keep the pitch to one paragraph,
Hmm.
because I don't have time to read, paragraphs and paragraphs and if I just get this email and I just see this whole long paragraph, all this,
Hmm.
I delete it. So um, just put a paragraph and just tell me what your idea is. Why, and also like, could you write 500 words about what it is you're pitching? Um, you know, don't show me like, oh, we hired this great data scientist. Maybe if it's Jeffrey Hinton, maybe that'll be different. But you know, those kinds of things. But so what I usually write about is, so I'm writing, like right now, I'm writing about how to evaluate um, the purchase of AI software. Okay. So, and I usually like to get different sources for that, and I'll quote them in the article. Um, but just a couple weeks ago, I got pitched from someone, and she said, Biden has this new AI initiative. They want to do this, this, and this, and I thought that's a great idea. So I'll write about that, and I wrote about it.
Hmm.
So I can't think of all the ideas, obviously, and I get pitched by a lot of PR people, but even I get doesn't you don't have to be a PR person. It could be the founder, or it could be whatever, someone. I don't care who it is at the company, and just come up with an interesting idea. If it fits kind of with what I typically write about, then I'll write about it. And if you're the one that pitched me, you're going to get in it because you gave me the idea. So that person who pitched me on the Biden initiative, I quoted her client in the article for Forbes.
Oh,
So
that's awesome.
yeah. So that's how it works for me. Um, if you just send me a press release, or I I get those all the time, but if you just one paragraph and a story idea, um, I'll definitely consider it.
And that
And I,
actually,
and I, and I usually write about once a week.
mhm.
Uh, yeah.
And what other tips do you have? This is actually very interesting, to getting published as a AI
Yeah.
company
Mhm.
or something like that.
Um, other tips. Don't annoy, don't annoy them.
Mhm.
So I know that this happens a lot. So they'll send me something. I literally I can't even count the number of pitches I get. So
Mhm.
um, and then they'll pitch me once and they'll say, oh, just in case it got in the spam filter, or you didn't see it, here's my pitch again, the same pitch. I delete again. That's kind of annoying. Um, um, my spam, chances are I probably got it and I just didn't respond to it.
Mhm.
It's typical for most media people because they don't have the time to respond to
Mhm.
everything. Um, be very responsive. So if they a lot of these reporters are on deadline,
Mhm.
so the faster you can get what they want, the better.
Mhm.
Um, you have a better chance if you have kind of a really interesting quote. Like, the worst quotes are like, they want to show off how smart they are about the technology. And also, that's the other thing, know the publication. So if it's Forbes, it's not a tech publication, it's a business publication.
Mhm.
So if you use like words like Kubernetes, or these fancy words, and it sounds like a data scientist wrote the quote, it's probably not going to get any traction.
Mm. That is
But
very
if
important.
it's something like Mark Benioff said, he was good at spinning up these quotes, he'll probably get quoted. And he just had a way with words. I mean, you know, he was just really interesting. He said interesting things
Mhm.
and little conversational, and he wasn't about showing off,
Mhm.
all the buzzwords he had. So I'll get these quotes and it's like, it means nothing. I like reading. There's just like a bunch of buzzwords there, but it doesn't mean anything to me.
Mhm.
Um, so, try to provide good insight, something that's a little conversational, maybe a little controversial can also help out too.
Mm.
Um, you know, if you're saying what everyone else is saying, then how are you going to stand out?
Mhm.
But let's say because everyone thinks the cloud is the only way to go. But let's say you have an opinion that maybe on premise is the way to go for this.
Mhm.
Well, that's interesting because it's kind of amazing because when I got to know Mark Benioff, it was just the opposite. You know, it was controversial to say that you would use the cloud,
Mm.
for your CRM or ERP or something like
Yeah.
that. Now it's totally crazy if you say, "Oh, we're going to buy some on-premise software," and
Uh-huh.
people look at you like, "What do you say?" Like, but a reporter might say, "Oh, that's an interesting viewpoint. That's different." Yeah.
So really try and highlight what
Um,
makes you different.
yeah. Yeah. With insight, there has to be something. Just saying something randomly that goes against the grain and you have no reason for saying it, it's not going to get you very far either.
Mhm.
But being very thoughtful and showing that if you see that maybe there's a way to cut against something that maybe is the conventional wisdom, can get you more notice.
Mhm.
So
Great. Is there anything else that you
yeah.
wanted to cover?
No, I think that's it. Really good conversation. Went down memory lane a little bit and talked about the future. So and these are the topics I really love to talk about. So really good conversation.
Great. Well, it's great having you on the show, Tom Taulli. And yeah, everyone follow him on Twitter at TTAULLI. And if you go to his Twitter, there's also his website there as well, which is just TAULLI.com. Yeah, great having you on the show. I really
Yeah,
enjoyed
thank
all
you.
of your insights. Super cool. Um,
Thank you.
yeah, see you around.
Okay, awesome. Have a good one.
You too.